hate it when it bunches up.
Hi, welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I'm author Carissa DeLay, and this is my co-host.
I hate when it bunches up. Jamie Vendera, in case they caught that. I hate when
So
my hair bunches
today,
up.
happy birthday, Superman.
Happy birthday, Clark Kent.
Here.
Oh, I should not have told. I gave away his secret
It
identity.
was alter ego,
Okay.
Kal-El.
All right.
Kal-El. Oh, do you know what Superman's middle name is?
Leslie.
No.
Okay. It's what?
It's Joseph?
Like on his planet, Cal Joseph, or you mean Clark Joseph Kent?
Whatever.
Okay, something like that. Cal Joseph, get off of this planet right now, you baby. Okay.
So you're funny.
All
right. So
I'll take a drink from my
today,
new straw.
oh yes, your straw that comes from the movie Tremors because it's a big sandworm.
It's a Lax Fox straw. It's where I can do my
Although
vocal exercises.
Dune's coming out.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for the second one.
Yeah. Although by the time we release this episode, it may have already been out. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. It's not out. I think it's coming out in March.
All right, so we're talking about...
This is leap year. This is leap year.
It is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Superman's birthday, leap year.
Crazy.
So we had to make it themed for that. So we are going to talk about graphic novels and comic books today. The writing process, the whole shebang, the differences, and kind of like the process. Even though I've never technically wrote one, you kind of, in a sense, you've kind of done the comic book graphic novel without illustrations because you've done the small TV books and movie books kind of put away.
Yeah, I kind of see it in pictures like you would a graphic novel, so I'm always plotting and seeing the pictures in my mind. So, and then I wore Blue Beetle today because I just watched the movie.
Yeah,
but just watched the movie.
Did you like it?
I like every superhero movie, so a lot of people are like, it's garbage. I thought it was fun. It was great for kids. As an adult, if you're going to we're going to pick apart this movie because the Snyderverse version is better than this, then, as an adult, if you're going to be that picky, you probably wouldn't have liked it. I have fun with all of them. I like Shazam. I like The Flash, even though Ezra Miller has went way off to the left field. I didn't want to say it, but cuckoo. So
I like the guy who played Barry Allen in the CW version.
Oh yeah, he's what was wrong with me? Grant Gustin, I believe that's his name. Watch me be wrong. Love that shit.
I'm not very good with their actual real names. I'm terrible with real names. I'm like, Edward from this, or the Green Arrow. Like I'm really kind of like the person that just knows your character. I may not know your real name unless I
liked it because Malfoy was on the Flash show.
Season
2 or 3. Yes, I liked his character.
Did watch that season. Yes. All right, so today we're going to discuss, like I said, comic books and graphic novels. So let's jump into what's the difference. They're very interchangeable for the most part, but the basics with comic books are their issues, and you have a long period of time to develop characters. You have an ongoing story that's going to keep coming out with different issues, and with a graphic novel, it's a binded story that's almost standalone. They have illustrations, they have dialogue in there, and like their little bubbles. And you're seeing more of a short blip of the story, the writing. You're seeing the images. It's kind of like almost like an adult sort of a version of a picture book.
Yeah, I mean, the only graphic novel I've ever read was The Dark Wrath of Shannara by Terry Brooks, and it was about Jer Almsford from The Wish Song of Shannara, one of the books in his first trilogy. And it's more like, I look at a graphic novel like, oh, they're going to turn this into a movie, so here's your cut scene, so you know what the actors have to say, and here's like a visual of what that scene's going to play out like. Where, I mean, a comic book, I know it's the same way, but it's so thin, and you get a little snippet of it, and it moves. But the cool thing about comics, because I was into comics as a kid and loved the Marvel, loved DC, but I remember reading Alpha Flight, and they've been talking about Alpha Flight lately, and I remember that's where I fell in love with Wolverine, because I didn't know who Wolverine was, and then he was a part of that group, and that was like an offshoot. It wasn't the X-Men. And so then you see all these comic book characters, and they move from comic to comic. The one thing that does drive me nuts, and
lots of crossovers.
The crossovers are great, but I hate it when and other people disagree with me, and I totally understand. But if I see a character and then they start another comic book series based on the same character and something's different, Like in some, Peter Parker can shoot webs, and the others, he's got to make those things for his wrist to shoot them.
It's the multiverse.
Yeah, I know, but it drives me nuts. But I got to lock into a character with everything they do. So
Well, but when you open worlds and you have a plethora of universes, anything's possible. I mean, because there's actually like Earth X, like there's different Earths on DC where you can change the whole persona of Superman. There's like evil Superman on certain planets, on a certain planet.
yeah, the zombie ones.
Mhm.
I just watched Loki season 2, and it was all about that
It could
with the
be anything.
multiverse and all those
Yeah.
threads and all those lives. So I get it.
Mhm.
It does open. It probably solved a problem way back when. Like, hey, man, I wish we can expand on this. I got a great idea, but Spider-Man wasn't with Gwen Stacy. Oh, well, let's write a new series and put him with her, or whatever. So, and same thing with Superman, because there was like Lana Lang, Lois Lane, and what is that with the
Well, yeah, but that was like high school, and
Lana
then
Lang,
like
Lois Lane. I think
yeah,
was the
they were
third one.
both, yeah. But so like that's the thing. The thing with comic books is they develop. Let's see here. Hold on. They develop over time with comic books, so you get a chance to build upon your previous stuff, or even have things that happen that change. Like for example, in the comic books, originally Superman only could jump really high. He could not fly.
Really? Yeah, I did
Mm-hmm.
not know that.
Yeah, so whenever they were making the cartoon, so the way they were doing it, it would have been easier for the cartoon to make him fly. So they communicated in the comic with the comic book world and on the TV show, and so they gave him the powers in the comics to fly.
Oh,
Yeah, so they can make
I
it easier for translation in the cartoon world.
wow. Yeah, did not know that.
Yeah, so collaborations, changing up all that stuff. Okay, so
Learn
back
something new every
to
day.
I've got notes here. So I've got like so many notes, and I've sent all these notes to Jamie, but
Yeah, but we know how many squirrels live in my brain. So this morning you're like, "Did you review the notes?" I'm like, "What notes?" Oh yeah, and I opened them up, and it was like, "Yes, too much." I'm like, "I'm going to wing this because
but
I
I'm
don't
here
read."
for it. Okay, so content and genre. So content. So comic books cover like a wide range, like fantasy, superheroes, horror. All these different types of fictional things where they have a very diverse audience. There are a lot of like, even like with anime, essentially, there are communities for different types of genres within these comic books and these graphic novels, because graphic novels also encompass like various genres, but they usually explore more older readers. I feel like graphic novels do. I don't know.
That's what I feel like. It's like I'm an adult. I'm not going to read comic books. Man, but that
Yeah.
graphic novel looks pretty good. I can do
Yeah,
that.
but and it's kind of like, it's almost like a visual novel that they're tackling deeper conflicts, maybe, where over time, like one issue of you've got like Superman and Zod, you've got like Superman's cousin, his other enemy, Cruel or something, like what was his name? He has a cousin, and it was almost like, it sounded like Cruel, almost like Cruella.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it's not Cruella DeVille, but
No, that was my Halloween costume.
yeah.
No, I can't remember. He had a cousin that was one of his enemies, but anyway, so like comic books, you think they're very small. I mean, they're so small that they're actually stapled. They're on lower quality paper. They're printed, and they're a quick story. They're like a smaller, like a TV episode, versus a graphic novel would be more like a movie. It's a little bit more in depth of the plot twist. Your comic book issues are developing these plots, like tertiary, like scenes, like going on throughout every issue, with just one villain, or one episode in a series. It's almost like it just kind of keeps building.
So yeah, so I can connect to that with the TV books and the movie books.
Mm-hmm.
So just like you said, I'm doing the same thing but without the pictures.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love. Now you might make me want to get back into comic books. I haven't read any for a while.
Okay, so then something that when you think of the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel versus a regular traditional fiction book, what would you think as far as more process would be with the publishing part?
Well, for one, I mean, with the reading and writing part, I'm not saying you can't have character development in that book, but if I'm writing, even a small 100-page book, that's so much more involved than a 30-page comic book. So there has to be more character development within that one book. Printing process, of course, it's going to cost you more to print, cost more to edit, but it could be offset, because if you're doing a comic book, I'm sure illustrators aren't cheap unless you jump on the AI bandwagon and just make up your own scenes. But you want look in the comic book world. All of these illustrators are revered. They're like, oh my gosh, there's a new Superman coming out, and this person is drawing. So if you want to make it in that success, you do have to have that relationship with an amazing artist to develop that rapport, and hopefully they grow as famous as you are as the comic book story writer. So it's hand in hand. If I'm writing a book, I've written with Daniel, and I'm going to be writing with you, but typically I'm writing a story. It's all on me. But I think if I'm going to write a comic, and I may someday with the graphic novels, at least, I'm going to want to work with an illustrator, and we're going to build this world together.
Right. So you're actually, that's a good point, because you're going to have to make sure that when you're doing a comic book, your storyline is words, but visually you have to work with an illustrator about what you're trying to see in that it stays consistent, which we've said multiple times on this podcast, is the consistency of how you're writing your story and how you're plotting out your storyboards. I feel like I'm envisioning like these storyboards, and you're trying to, because comic books are not meant to be super wordy. They're basically conversationalists, they're like a big conversation with small little snippets of narration.
And the illustration shows you the story, and then you tell the word. You know what? The perfect example, of course, this is a music video. I released a song for the music project called Angel Fire East, which is a nod to my favorite author, Terry Brooks. Ryan Wall, my co-songwriter and co-singer, he plays guitar, play keyboards. I gave him the idea. I'm like, look, it's based on these two books from Terry Brooks. And I told him the overall view of it, or those three books. He did this wonderful, really cool video. And it was actually before Unreal Engine and all these video programs were coming out. So he spent hours and hours doing this. And I applaud him. It looks great. However, where it falls short is my fault, because it doesn't perfectly line up with the story. And I would give him like, oh, there's this demon, and he's wearing a jacket, so he looks like a man, and here's what's happening, and this is blowing up, and a missile. So he just took what he saw in his mind, and he made these visuals for this video, and they were cool, but I'm like, they could have been a little better, and that's not his fault. That's mine, because I did not relate what I needed in those storyboards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so like that's the thing, is making sure it follows through, which we've said, organizing. So that's another thing that may have to be when you're writing a comic book and a graphic novel, is keeping so if you're creating a character in a comic book, you have to keep that character's consistent. So there are some of the things, like with Superman, there are things in episodes that people who dive deep know about him that some people don't even know. I read one time, and this has been a while ago, because I've always loved Superman. Like, I have Superman tattoo. I have Superman, is my thing. My gamer tag is Kara Zor-El, his cousin, Supergirl. So that's my thing. So I've always kind of dived into like the Superman thing, and I cannot remember where I read it, but a long time ago, the original development of Superman, he was a villain. And he's a Cleveland, Ohio Superman. Like, that's the writers, So all these things that I would dive into, but there's little things that people, if they dive deep, they don't know about Superman because they watch the movies. And some of these things aren't portrayed in the movies. And one of those things that when I was researching some stuff for this particular episode, that I didn't even know, was that Superman can shapeshift.
It's funny, because I read yesterday like the most powerful superheroes, and one of the things I saw on Superman's power was shapeshifting. I'm like, what?
You saw that then?
Yeah, this was just
That's
yesterday.
crazy that we both
And
like. I've never known that, and I learned that just like this week, and I was like,
but
oh,
it
that's something I
it
didn't know.
it went in my ear and out the other because I'm like, okay, X-ray vision, can fly, super strong, power of the sun, can shape
Mhm.
shift, and I'm like, that's got to be a typo, and I
So
just let it
no, the
go.
shape shifting was very specific. That they, I mean, it was only like I think only mentioned maybe once, but where he could change who he was to disguise himself. And it was like, well, why wouldn't he change himself to be his alter ego? But Clark Kent is the persona that protects Superman essentially.
Oh, maybe he shape shifts glasses onto his face. Okay.
No, it's because he has such control of his muscle structure that he can change what he looks like. But I don't think they explored it in depth. But it was specifically in a comic, and it's just there, but it's not something that's explored. Like I think he did change his persona or image or something for one of the comics, but it wasn't something that was like one of his abilities that's like constantly whatever.
Hey, and if you want to know what Superman will be like as a villain, watch Brightburn. Have you seen that movie?
No,
Watch Brightburn.
Brightburn.
Just
What is
check it
that?
out.
Is it
It's
on Netflix
it
or something?
Yeah, it was a movie. It was out several years ago, and it's basically what if Superman were evil. So they don't call him, Clark or anything, but it's the same situation. He landed in this ship, and he grew up, and things started happening, and
I think I did watch that, but I didn't know that was the title of it.
yes,
Yeah.
at the like he's killing everybody at the end. Broke that little girl's arm. Was like, wow, this is crazy.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they explore that within like the other Earths too. You know, as far as if he was they kind of created almost like a Nazi thing, like it, this whole like
Yep.
leader of the Nazi army, and he's on the evil side of it with, of course, red kryptonite. That kind of makes him do all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah, and they play on some of that in the Arrowverse, like if you watch Arrow or some of the other shows.
Oh yeah, they do that, which is really cool. Love Stephen Amell. I'd actually
Yep.
know that character's real name, so it's like, oh yeah. And fun facts: Superman. Do you know he can't shave his beard with his regular razor?
Well, I could see that. So yeah, I never thought of that. How does he shave it? Kryptonite blades?
Laser vision, like the in his mirror.
Oh, that's what he does.
Flex
Okay.
the beam. All right, back to comic book writing. All right. So, comic book writing involves several steps. Okay, so let's talk about some of these steps, which we kind of talked about some of these, but you have your idea generation. You have to kind of create your idea. Like, okay, I have an idea for a comic book. Now I have to sit down, brainstorm these ideas, put it all out. I have to think of what type of genre I'm going to fall in because not all comic books are about superheroes. You have to figure out your main story arc and you're almost putting your comic books in that arc. You got to get like subplots that we've talked about where it's like, here's your little thing, here's your main point, but then you have to have kind of build up to these things. Like almost like if you're watching the CW, you know that everybody's trying to stop a certain villain by the end of the season, but there's small story arcs inside those. So you got to kind of develop those. You got to sit down and like plot all this out, and you got to make sure that you have like a structure to your storytelling. So if you're creating like this vision, make sure it stays throughout the whole thing. With your images, like you're not trying to make it too wordy. You got to make sure there's good conversation or interaction. If there's no words and it's just like that visual, like the pow, like they're hitting each other. Like I think that would be kind of cool to create that effect. I
I
don't have
think
a desire to write a comic book, but I think it'd be kind of cool to
I
like.
think it'd be much harder than writing a book because
I do. I
you
do
have
think it
to
would be.
you have to tell the story in about 5 to 10% of the wording you would use, and
Yes,
really
you're
make
trying.
sure.
Yeah, and narration pieces, and it's very simple. Like if you have to be able to create a storyline with mostly images, small communication. Like if a comic book or a graphic novel had too many words in it, it would be too much. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I know one of my daughters, it's the Heartstopper series. It's a graphic novel, and she loves that series and that author. So she like can speed through those things like really quick, but she loves them.
Man, I tell you, for a future podcast, I hope we can find, if you're listening and you write for DC or Marvel, any company, I'd love to have somebody on. I'd love to have the team, the illustrator and the writer,
Mm-hmm.
just to get an insight on the process, because like I've taken like Age of the Sigil years ago and was breaking it down into tiny plot points in case we could pitch it to Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And that's extremely hard. For me it was. It's like, because when I'm creative, it's just a poof, a million ideas come out, and it's like, okay, I got to wrestle them in, fish them, and really tighten it up to tell this story in as little words as possible. So you have the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, but you have the scenery right there. So
Yeah. Well, and that so yeah, and so that's the thing. Like when you're talking about the dialogue and stuff, so you have to kind of create almost. So say you're not the illustrator, maybe you're the story creator. You have to sit down with your illustrator, and I'm not sure how the process would be. Like, okay, in this scene, I want them to like punch each other. In this scene,
yep,
I want to do this. In this scene, I want this to happen. In this, so then they have to like, okay, I have to visualize what's yours in your head. So you're almost you have to be detailed in your description of your layout to the person who's going to be inking your page, the person who's
yep.
going to be laying out your artwork. So yeah, I can see this being very complex, and I'm surprised how frequent uh, issues came out of comic books. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's so
back in
many
the
comic
day,
books.
I mean,
Yeah.
now they're spitting them out left and right. But even thinking like 50, 60, 70 years ago when these were first, I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every week, couldn't wait.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. So I wasn't thinking about this, but when I was researching, I was thinking, um, so when you are writing a novel, when we write a novel, and I've talked about this before, like I'll have a paragraph, I'll have my dialogue and stuff, but then sometimes I'll italicize something to create this is in the person's head. This is what they're thinking in their head. Or we have a line of describing a scene. Well, they're going to have visually what the scene looks like. But at the same time, we may have noises. You have to visually create noises in your comic book. You
Poof.
have to,
Yeah.
yeah, that poof,
Kapow.
the pow, like, yeah, all these things. You're visually creating these things. So it's like a hand in hand. Like this is more about the illustration, um, literally bringing to life your words, because your words aren't going to be as big as the illustration, the visual part of it. So I can only imagine how you would edit that. How would you like? I mean, that would be very interesting to see how you edit, because a comic book, you're looking for like inconsistencies in your story. You're looking for like, okay, so this character here, I mean, you have to be an editor that can see detail. Like your Superman in this episode is wearing blue and da da da. Oh, why did you make this one have red here? Everywhere else, it's yellow.
Yep.
You have to edit visually what the images are consistently through the book
Yeah, and I mean color
or the
grading
comic book.
and all that. But you just reminded me of like the old Batman with Adam West, and him and Robin get a fight, and you see kapow,
On the
splash.
screen.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, good times.
Good times. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure just like the whole storyboard of creating a comic book would be very interesting to talk to an editor who's done editing for a comic book. We should probably get a comic book editor on here. Maybe Dustin has a certain person that's edited his comic books.
You're planting that seed because I know
Again,
you want me to get Dustin
listen,
Bates from Star
I
Set.
so want Dustin Bates,
Yes.
because he's a songwriter. He's he's literally written something for Marvel. Like, what part of this are we not clicking here? That Dustin would be our great go-to person to
Okay,
tell us
so
the
what
process.
you got to do, and I'm planting this now in this video, you have to cut this out so we put just this clip on TikTok and whatever. I'll say, hey,
Hey,
Dustin.
Dustin, we need you for songwriting process and comic book writing
Yeah.
process. We need your brain to
He has
unload on
such
here.
a creative
I know
mind
he's
too.
busy,
Yep.
but
Yep.
he's so smart. But his music goes with his comic books, so his mental capacity to create these comic books along with his music, it's like, okay, he's seeing things on a whole different level, and we need that level to be like explained on this podcast.
Squirrel just ran by. If you're interested in writing a comic book, I would probably pick your favorite fiction novel that you love, and think, okay, it may be 400 pages long, maybe 100 pages long. Think, how can I break this down? And I don't even know how long a comic book is, 20, 30 pages, 50.
Yeah, I mean, it's about 30-ish pages or so,
Okay.
depending on the issue. Yeah, I mean, or depending on whatever. Sometimes you get the deluxe version. And
So storyboard your favorite novel. Even just the writing, and you can take from it. I know it was not plagiarism or something, but you're breaking it down. Hey, you may even send it to that author and say, hey, I storyboarded your book because I love this.
people
Have
do
this.
that. people do that. Like these fan fiction things, people will do that kind of stuff. There's a fan fiction graphic novel for like lots of books.
See one time about Snape when he was a teenager and when he was like friends with Lily, and I loved it. It was meticulously shot. It looked great. I was like, wow, why isn't this pulled into the stories? And it was fan fiction.
Yeah, there's tons of fan fiction. There's fan fiction for like so much stuff. But like there's also, like I said in the beginning of this, there's communities specifically for those things. So also as a writer, find your community. And with that community, maybe seek out someone who seems to be giving like really great advice and connect with them and say, hey, I need some feedback. Let me know how you feel about what I'm doing in this development of this comic book I'm trying to create. Ways to like talk to other writers who've done it and like, can you help me improve my skills? What am I doing wrong? What do I need to work on? You know what I mean?
And if you can't find that community, create it. So, for example, if you love my books, Age of the Sigil, create that community and make the graphic novels for me. I will be highly appreciative.
Yeah.
Maybe it will inspire me to finish book 4.
Yeah. Well, so now let's move on to the process of publishing a comic book versus like kind of how fiction novels, it's different because we are editing words, we are editing book covers, we are editing just basically this huge novel type thing, and we are putting it in a binder, and we're putting it on the bookshelves of like Books a Million. We are trying to get into traditional bookstores that way. Comic books are different. They have their own section. They have sometimes their own stores, comic book stores. They have a different
around here. So you just got me thinking because and you probably researched this one like, we've never published a comic book. I wonder if they do it out there. I've typed it in, Morris Publishing is the first one that pops up. Because I'm thinking if you're doing a graphic novel printing, here's another one. So there are companies out there that do it. I don't know the process of getting it done. If this is something you want us to dive in deeper, we can. But I'm thinking surely if that's the case, I don't know if they'd be print on demand, but they're probably like, yeah, you got to print out 1,000 comic books or whatever.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know because I mean, it was probably like the same idea as like if we order books, if you're ordering something from a printing company, it may be like the more you purchase, we're going to give you a better deal. Yeah, because we're doing a bunch in bulk, so it may be like that type thing. So.
Well, it's also in today's day and age, especially with like KDP, with Kindle and all that, you can do print on demand. So surely it also extends to graphic novels. I know it's got to because I know they do children's books that way. So
yeah. So okay, so I was doing some research, and so visually and text-based, most obvious difference is the presence of comic books. We've talked about that, like visually, and the absence of a lot of wording, and it's more of a story. So you have to make sure that when you're going to publish this, that you're portraying this story and that you're fitting in the genre. So you got to kind of make sure that you're putting yourself in the published section where your book is going to find that community.
So fantasy, demonic, apocalyptic romance.
Exactly. I mean, it seems fair. I mean, it seems pretty specific. Like it should be easy, right?
Not at all. Exactly. No. Excuse me, sir. Where is the fantasy, demonic, apocalyptic romance section in Barnes & Noble? Oh, okay. Thank you. We got one book, Crystal Gate. Now we have 4 Rivers. Okay.
Yeah. And that's another thing. So whenever you are formatting your comic book, it's kind of like whenever we talk about writing, we visualize it in our head what we want our books to look like. So when you're formatting your comic book, you're literally seeing it in your head. You have to format it on your pages so your reader can go through and see, oh, I can see what's in your head, and make sure that's consistent. Or we've talked about this, don't jump from this to this in one paragraph. So you can't jump from one page to the next and like lose part of the story. Like, oh, how do we get here?
Oh yeah, you wouldn't. And another thing I was thinking about, you talk about a comic book store, you go in, and why do I love to go in there? Because you have all these colorful covers, and a cover, like you can be aloof with like Crystal Gate, and you're like, do I know what it is? But in a comic book store, you like see the Hulk smashing Thor or whatever it is. So it's almost like it's one of the images from the comic as the cover. And I mean, we rarely do that when you're doing you kind of give a vague scene, but it isn't like that. So
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It has its own aesthetic. And another thing I was just thinking about, like typically when you're writing a fiction, unless you're a co-writer, when you're writing fiction novels, you are usually a standalone author and you kind of like are your own thing. But when you are doing a comic book, unless you are like multifaceted and you're doing the artwork and you're doing the writing and you're doing everything, which is probably a very rarity. I'm sure people have done that, but it's very rare. But you're typically writing as a team for comics.
Yeah, that was my point earlier. So it's like I don't think you could really write a comic. You may have the vision, but if you're not working with that artist, or even if you're working with other people, you could have several writers, but at least the writer and the artist to pitch back and forth so the vision comes to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is funny because I just saw this on TikTok the other day or Instagram, but there is an artist, I'll have to find it, maybe share it with you, that literally he spent 700 hours recreating a scene purely from drawing it, purely from sketching it. I think it was one of the Harry Potter scenes even. He does like several things like that. It's fan stuff, but he takes these scenes and just completely draws every scene and then does a flip book. And it's
Yes.
It's amazing. I'm like,
yes, that's crazy.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, while there are differences in, comic books and fiction novels and, graphic novels, these are all very unique mediums to get your story out. So if you're a comic book writer and you're interested in maybe reaching out and giving us your feedback of your experiences, we would love to hear from you. We would love to know your process. We would love to know more. Maybe in the future we can have you on, even if anything, you can give us some tips on how you got published, or if you're trying to get published, what's your process? We want to know. We absolutely
a graphic novelist as well. And that's the thing about Always Write Podcast. We don't know everything. We're not even close to that. We're here because we love writing and we love the process and we want to share with you. We want you to share with us.
Yes. And that's the thing. Our goals are to help you find your own goals as a writer. So that way you're always writing and you don't get that whole I can't write anymore. We want to help you find ways to tap into your personal goals as a writer in whatever fashion it is.
And let your inner superhero out.
Whatever niche it is. So, but okay. Well, I think that's pretty good. We can always cover this again if we can get a comic book writer on here, specifically Dustin Bates.
Yeah. That he's a graphic novelist.
Yes. Yeah, but they kind of go hand in hand when it comes to creating a storyline with images. So,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm not saying they're not the same, but they're also not too far different. It's more of the story arc or whatever, in some of the other things that we've talked about. So at the same time, it's more visual than it is word.
Yes.
All right.
Happy birthday. Yes.
Happy birthday, Kal-El.
Joseph.
Yeah. Joseph.
Joseph.
So for now, we are going to move on to tell you to go to our socials. You can find all of our socials on the landing page on VenderaPublishing.com by going to the alwayswritepodcast.com. Click on any of the icons, and it'll take you to our YouTube. It'll take you to our Spotify. It'll take you to some of our social media pages, and you can just click there. You can follow and keep up to date with what we are releasing. So also, I want to know that in the future, if you have any comments, you can email us at alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com, and that we will reach back out to you if it pertains to an episode or it pertains to anything that we've talked about. I do not respond to junk mail. I've got some recent junk mail that I'm I'm not responding to that.
Yep. Too busy.
Yeah, I ain't got time for that. All right. So happy leap year, happy birthday, Superman, and I'm going to sign off and thank you for listening. I'm author Cursa DeLay with my co-host
Blue Beetle. Jamie Vendera.
And you know what? If anybody's watching, if you notice, we did not have a huge presence of our other co-host, the water bottle. Or many squirrels.
That's because the worm or whatever you called it made its appearance today. Yeah, the trimmer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening.
See you next podcast.